Hi, everyone. I'm Katherine Chaliff, and today we're going to go through an introduction to AI assisted coding. So, our roadmap is going to be first, we'll go over the basics of these tools, things you need to know to select the right tool, and everything you need to get started. Next, we're going to talk about creating a detailed prompt so you can have a good basis for when you come into the program itself. Today, we're going to be using Cursor, but everything I say applies to basically all of the AI assisted coding tools. So we'll build the first version together in Cursor. And then I'll take you through the process of refining and iterating whatever you choose to make. So a little about me. My name's Katherine Chaliff. I'm a product designer. I've been working in UX for 4 years, most recently at SimilarWeb and Retrain AI. I hold a master's degree in human-computer interaction from Reichman University, and I recently won an AI design competition run by Wix and Base44 as part of that. So I'm really excited to share my knowledge with you. It's revolutionizing how I work as a designer, but I really feel like everyone is able to do so much more with computers as a result of these amazing tools we have. So hopefully this gives you a window to get started into that. So the first thing you need to know is you really don't need to learn how to code or very much technical at all. All you need to know how to do is to think clearly about what you want and then describe your intent, what you're trying to accomplish very precisely. When you combine that with just a little bit of technical knowledge, you can make a really big impact and make things possible that you probably thought you would need to go back to school and get a computer science degree or completely retrain yourself in order to do. So we're really in a new world here. So next, let's talk about selecting what AI coding tool you're going to use, because there's a lot on the market and you might need some guidance to figure out what tools are best for which things, where to get started. So here's a couple of popular tools as of when I'm making this in January 2026. You've probably heard a lot of these names: Base44, Lovable, Figma Make for us designers, Google Anti-Gravity, Claude Code. This is far from an exhaustive list, but here's a couple of examples. So I like to group these into two main categories: pure vibe coding tools versus AI-enhanced IDEs, or integrated developer environments. Today, we're going to focus on Cursor, which is an integrated developer environment, but everything I'm saying could easily be applied to Claude Code, Google Anti-Gravity, or any of the other competitors that I'm not listing here. So what exactly is an integrated developer environment? If you're a product designer, a good analogy could be that it's essentially Figma for coding. It's a text editor that has assistant tools built in that can help you code more effectively. Now, in the AI world, we have AI assistants inside of the IDE. So Cursor is built on VS Code, which is the most common developer IDE. Our process in software development is changing. In this moment that we're in, all of our tools are sort of starting to converge. It's a very dynamic field. So Cursor recently added a feature called Visual Edit, where you can drag and drop things, select things, and then change qualities of them. So it's starting to work a bit more like design tools in some ways. So I expect that this landscape will continue to change. But at its core, Cursor is based on these text editor type tools. A little more about these two categories. So the way I characterize a pure vibe coding tool, you really don't need any at all technical knowledge to work with them. You usually can only make websites, and usually only using one specific kind of tech stack, meaning like the technologies behind the website. And it's typically limited by platform. This can also affect your ability to customize how your product looks and feels. Usually there's limited ability to export the code that you've generated. And then the pricing of these tools is typically by the prompt. So each time you type a prompt and hit enter, that would be like 1 credit within the system, and there'd be a limit on that typically. With AI enhanced IDEs, it's helpful to have slightly more technical knowledge. Again, you don't need to be a developer, but you need to know some basic things about how development works. These tools are much more flexible. You can build pretty much anything you want. If you want to write a little Python program, or you want to make a desktop app, or you want to make a website, or you want to make a phone app, all of those things are possible. Basically anything you can imagine. I personally, for this project, I recommend starting with a website, but you can experiment and really do anything. It's pretty amazing. In IDEs, because they're made for developers, you have full access to the code base and all of the other files that might be generated. So you might have help documents or like images that get generated as part of your app. You have access to everything. It's all totally flexible. You can take it to another tool. You can keep working on it in a more traditional development way. Anything you want is possible here. But the pricing for these tools is a bit different. So the pricing is typically by tokens, which are like units of information in and out of the LLM. It can be, and then you also get to, and we'll talk about this a bit later, pick which AI model you use, which can affect the output and the pricing in some ways. So the pricing is a bit less straightforward on these tools. Another important thing to know is that fundamental technology behind these tools is the same LLMs that we know and love. So like Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, these websites make a connection with those services. And through that connection, you're able to edit the code. These aren't new programs in that we open them separately on our computer, but the technology is exactly the same as whatever AI you're probably used to talking to already, like ChatGPT or Claude or X or like Grok from X, that kind of thing. So at this point, you might be asking, why not just use ChatGPT or Gemini? Why get a whole nother program, a whole nother subscription? So the reason why you might pick to use an AI integrated developer environment instead of just copying and pasting things out of Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini is because Cursor has the ability to read all of the files in your code, and it can make those edits directly in your code. So there's no copying and pasting back and forth. And it's also really nice because you can use other development features like testing whatever programs you make in the browser, making manual edits if you want to change small things instead of using prompts. And then there's also autocomplete features. So if you do make a change directly in the code and you make a mistake or something, the AI will anticipate what you're trying to write, and you can use autocomplete to just finish it right there. It's just much more flexible and much more powerful to use Cursor because it's able to have a much broader context window, which we think of as like short-term memory that lets, as opposed to going like one by one where you're copying and pasting something that could get quite long if you have complicated code base. So now that you understand a bit about how these systems work, to get started, we're going to want to create a really strong detailed prompt to get the first version of what we're going to build. So this is where we should start thinking like a product team would in a company, but with the assistance of AI that can speed things up a bit. So I recommend that as you go through this, you start with any idea that's interesting to you. I recommend starting with a website. I wrote a little example prompt here where I want to make a website where users can buy lotion for their dolphin to improve their dolphin skincare routine. So really anything you want, you can do it, can imagine it. You could do this in Cursor directly, but I recommend taking this to ChatGPT or Gemini and just talk back and forth with it to define the problem you're trying to solve. Define the user. Ask it about the relevant tech stack, which means the technology to build whatever you're going to build, and just start to imagine the full experience and get it in text. I recommend just going back and forth with ChatGPT a bit on this to get a really clear sense of what you're building. And I mentioned it briefly already, but it's really important to ask AI to recommend a good tech stack for your project. This is a prompt that you could enter after you've been going back and forth with it about what you're trying to build. Not being developers ourselves, we might not know exactly what technologies are used to build whatever kind of service we're trying to build. The best way, as we all know, LLMs do have their flaws, but in general, they have a pretty good understanding of a lot of fields that we might not understand. So ask it what a good tech stack might be for your project, and then ask follow-up questions so that you can get a better sense of why it's making the recommendations that it's making. So after you've used AI to really get a good understanding of what you're trying to build, again, I recommend asking AI about your personas. If you don't feel like what it gives you is right, just keep validating and refining. Ask it to describe the core flows you would need in the app and every screen. Once you have a chat where all of these things are really covered well, you can put in a prompt like what I wrote here. Looks good, make it into a detailed prompt for Cursor, and then it will give you just a very nice detailed summary that'll serve as a really strong foundation for your project. So these initial prompts can get quite long, and that's totally okay. It's okay if it's like pages and pages of text. The AI can handle it, and the more detail you give at this stage, the better. It'll really help with getting a good result as you get started in Cursor, moving from ChatGPT or Gemini or whichever LLM you're talking to at this stage. So just to give you a sense of the process, so I created a Cursor prompt for an idea that I had for a web app that was a payments and invoicing processor. You can see just a little bit of the prompt here, and if you open up the recording of the presentation, you can go to this slide and then copy it out if you're curious. This goes on for pages and pages and pages. To put that prompt into Cursor, it cost me about $1.25 in tokens to build a fully functional working version of this app. This is very powerful tools and very, very low startup costs to get really, really developed, detailed results. So you can see how incredible it is, how much you can get for such relatively little investment of time and energy. Like, to go from an idea to a fully built product with $1.25 credits and a bit of time using ChatGPT is really, really remarkable. We're in a special moment in human history, I think, that this kind of thing is possible. I want to go over a bit of basic development terminology. Understanding this terminology will help you navigate the system effectively. So first we have the repository. So a repository is just a name for the folder where you keep all of the files that your code needs to run. So photos, but also the code itself, like anything that you need is going to be in there. The terminal is a way of interacting with your computer only by typing letters. So there's no graphical user interface here. You're going to use this a lot during the development of your app. A lot of it can be automated for you with Cursor, but it's important to know that you have this portal into your computer that doesn't involve, moving your mouse around. You just get to type directly to it. So now we have the front end. So the front end is what users see of your apps. This is the UI, layouts, interactions. And then you have the back end. So that's the data, logic, and rules behind an app that make it work. So remember earlier when I was talking about the difference between pure vibe coding tools and AI-enhanced integrated development environments? The difference between the two of those is typically that you have much greater access to the back end when you're working in an AI-powered integrated development environment instead of a vibe coding tool. And then dependencies, another really important word. Dependencies are things that your app needs to run. Cursor can install these for you. And if you copy your repository from one computer to another, you might need to install dependencies. So great. Now that you understand these words, we can go on to starting your first project in Cursor. When you open Cursor, you're going to see a window like this. And you're going to click on Open Project. You can ignore everything else on the screen for now. When you click Open Project, it's going to pop up the window. If you're on Windows, obviously it'll appear different. I'm working on Mac right now. Right now, the window where it'll show all the folders on your computer. I recommend making a folder on your computer called code and using this to hold all of the projects. So when you start a new project, just what you should do here is just make a new folder inside code, and then that will be the repository for your new projects. So you should make a folder called code, then click new folder, name the folder whatever you want your project to be called, select it, like so it appears selected. You don't have to double click on it, and then click open. And so once you do that, you'll come to this screen within Cursor, and you can see like Cursor's basic UI. They keep changing it slightly, but it's pretty customizable. So it'll look like this, which again can be really intimidating, I get, if you haven't worked with this before. So you can see at the top, in the top center of the top bar, you'll see the name of the folder that you just created. And then you'll see this sort of blank screen where it has all of this list of shortcuts, and then this sidebar area that has a chat. In this upper left corner, you can see these customization options for Cursor. So this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but these are the things that you need to know that are in each of these regions within Cursor. So this left sidebar has all the files. So you will be able to see like all of the files that are inside of your repository there. I like to keep that open personally. And the bottom section, you'll be able to see the terminal and also the logs as you run your program. You can see the AI chat, which is in the right sidebar. And then you also have the option to swap left and right. So you can put the AI chat on the left side if you want, and the files on the right side. And then you also have settings, of course. So I personally, when I'm working, I like to have my files open on the left side. The center part will display your documents once you have documents open. So I like the documents open in the middle, and then the AI chat on the right. And then I typically have a second monitor open where I have a browser window, usually Chrome, and then ChatGPT. So I can also talk to an AI without using Cursor credits. So yeah, that's how I like to set it up. So now let's talk about how to prompt Cursor to get the exact results. This is what the chat window looks like within Cursor. And there's a couple different options on it, and I'll explain each of them. First, we have the different modes. We have agent, plan, debug, and ask. Agent mode will write and edit your code directly. Most of the time, this is what you're going to be using. This is what people think of most of the time when they think of this. You put in a prompt, you say, do this, and then it does it. Plan mode creates an outline of the steps that you need to do before you make code changes. And debug mode helps you fix errors that are in your existing code. In ask mode, which is also really helpful, you can ask questions about the code base that you already have without making changes. So using the correct mode is really important for getting the right results, because if you ask Cursor to do something while you're in that it needs to change in your code while you're in ask mode, it won't be able to make the edits that you want. And if you ask a question just because you want to understand something better in your database while you're on agent mode, it's possible that there will be changes that you didn't intend to happen. So it's very important to select the correct option based on what you're hoping to accomplish. So the next thing that you can change are the models. So you can see that right here where it says auto. Search all the different models, and you could choose, like, do I want to use Grok? Do I want to use Gemini? Do I want to use ChatGPT? And then which version of each of those models you want to use. People get over-focused on which model to use. My recommendation is to just use auto. Unless you're a very advanced user, the differences between the different models isn't so important. And then there's a couple of additional tools you'll notice. So you can use the @ symbol. You can either click it here, or you can just type the @ symbol to focus on a specific file in your repository. So a way that I use this a lot, for example, is if I have a file that includes all of my styling information and I want to make a new page that uses that, I might tag it. I usually think of it as tagging it, since it's is kind of similar to other programs we use regularly. You can also see the photo here, which uploads images. This refers to the browser, but you can just leave it. It's usually blue by default. And then you can see here you have a button for dictation. You can use this if you prefer to dictate. I personally don't find that the dictation that's through Cursor is very good. I really think that other apps have much better dictation engines, but if you really prefer to use that, you can use it. So before we get started actually running a prompt, it's really important to understand that the tools aren't perfect. Sometimes things are going to break, or the AI won't succeed to build what you're asking it to build. And because we're not developers, we're not always going to fully understand what's happening. What I really recommend is that you copy the errors into Cursor, or at least give it some screenshots, and just keep asking why those errors are occurring. Usually it can fix it. If you're really not able to get anywhere, you're always able to revert your changes, to stop a prompt midway if it starts doing something that you don't like, or to just start over, make a new repository, start from scratch. But really, the golden rule of using AI tools is to just be really persistent. And when you don't understand things, keep asking questions. So to run your first prompt, I recommend this process. So first, you want to switch to plan mode. Then you should paste in the detailed prompt you have with ChatGPT, and then press go, this like orange button in the bottom. As you do that, when your prompt is running, Cursor is going to describe the steps that it's taking. At this point, you can add, if you notice something, you can add a follow-up prompt. You can also, if things are going really in a direction you're not expecting, you can hit the stop button. But probably you won't need to do that, just so you know it's an option. Typically, as it will start building the plan based on your prompt, it'll ask you some questions about how you want to build your app, like the one you can see below in the screenshot. You can either answer them, or you can see next to the continue button, there's a little button that says skip. You can also press skip, and it'll just do whatever it thinks is best. I recommend reading these and trying to understand them and giving the best answer you can, because they do help you get a better output. But if something's really just beyond your technical knowledge, feel free to hit skip. So once it finishes, it'll give you this plan in a markdown file, which is just a type of formatted text file. And you can scroll through it. And then when you're ready, you can press the build button that you can see either here or here. And it'll go through the checklist that it made on what to do to actually build you a real app. That'll also probably take a couple of minutes for it to do. So once it's done, you're going to want to see your results, right? And assuming you made a website the way that I recommended, you switch to agent mode and then put in this prompt: how can I see my website in the browser? And after it goes through your project setup, it'll start what's called a dev server, which is just a way to see a website that you made like locally, meaning like on your own machine. And it'll give you some commands probably to run. Just say yes to whatever it says, because there's a couple of different ways to do this, and it might choose something different in your case than it did in mine. But after that, it'll give you a link that looks like this with localhost and then a number after it, and you can just click on it and then look in your browser and you can see your results. So for my little dashboard app that I made, this was my results. Again, one prompt with $1.25 of credits used, and I had, a pretty, it's not maybe the most designed dashboard ever. Like, there are definitely ways, as a product designer, I can see maybe this could be improved, but it's functional, and it's a good starting point for us to then go to customize towards something that's better. So just to summarize this process we just took you through. So we created a really strong detailed prompt. We brought it to Cursor and created a plan using plan mode. And then Cursor built an initial system that we were able to view. So pretty incredible. Just, less than an hour, we're able to go from an idea to something that works. So after you have this first version, you're probably going to want to make changes, right? I recommend you start by just doing some simple UI changes. So you could ask Cursor to change something like the font, the colors, the sizing, maybe the order that the elements are in the page. With all of this, the limit is your creativity, but you have to describe clearly what you want. And you can also try the visual editor that I mentioned, where you can select different elements and do that. Just as this is an example prompt, you could put in, just say, add a light gray background to the dashboard, and then it just changes the color of the dashboard. Something really simple like that, maybe start out with. When you want to make a bigger change, completely redesigning a page, really like moving around elements like from page to page, or changing how navigation works, or adding a new feature, you can also try that. The more complex your changes are, it's important to know there's a bigger chance things will break, but it's okay because you can always revert your changes. This button will appear when you hover over past prompts, and if you just click this, it'll revert to the version before the prompt was run. And just as you make changes and explore more what's possible with Cursor, just remember, keep asking questions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Katherine Chaliff. You can find me on a bunch of different platforms at Build with Katherine. And thank you so much. Best of luck with making all your projects. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or any social media, really, if you have more questions for me, or in the comments here. I'd love to hear that. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks so much.